In Ghana, we live in a country where people glorify scams and fraud as if it is a normal hustle, pretending they don't exist when in reality they do. On the streets, fraud has helped many Ghanaian youths, some even lifting themselves out of poverty through it. But the reality is that it has also destroyed lives and harmed the economy, especially when the money is squandered foolishly instead of being invested in businesses that can create jobs and move the nation forward. Wicked blogger Ghana has always said it. If you can't leave the game, at least lay low and build something with the money. Because when you flaunt too much, you invite attention from the feds, and no amount of juju or street power can save you when the law finally comes knocking. That's why the story of Davido G.H., one of Ghana's loudest and most arrogant Game Boys, is the perfect example of how living recklessly can bring everything crashing down. Davido G.H., born David Mensah, has for years hidden under the shield of being a music executive, running his so-called D-Global Entertainment label, splashing money on artists like Camido, Last Made, Yahoo Hero, and Abba with the Sauce. Not because he genuinely wanted to support talent, but because he wanted to trend and cover up his fraudulent dealings. This is the same guy who has flaunted bundles of cash on social media, posed with cars, mansions, jewelry, and built the image of a big man, when behind the scenes, his empire was built on fraud, money laundering, and ripping off both foreigners and his own fellow hustlers. For years, EOCO has been getting tip-offs about his activities, with victims reporting him to the police and other authorities. But his money and influence have always bought him a way out. He was protected by the silence of bloggers, Snapchat influencers, and media personalities whom he had paid off or intimidated into keeping quiet. He thought his money would forever shield him, but the game always catches up. And this month it finally did when EOCO moved in and arrested him at his residence. The charges are serious: fraud-related offenses, money laundering, and defrauding by false pretense. This time, Davido G.H. couldn't meet his bail conditions, which shows just how deep the case is. EOCO has already moved to freeze some of his accounts and seize certain properties while gathering evidence. Wicked blogger Ghana's intel from the ground confirms that this is not a minor arrest. It is part of a much bigger clampdown. The government is on a mission to clean house, and high-profile arrests like these send a message not only to the fraud boys in Ghana, but to international partners like the FBI that Ghana is ready to cooperate. We've seen this play before. Remember Kofi Boat? Remember Dada Joe Remix? Remember Pascal Agoni? All fraud boys who flew too close to the sun, flaunted too much, and ended up being served as examples when the pressure from abroad grew too hot for the government to ignore. Davido G.H. might have thought he was untouchable, but the script is writing itself the same way it always does. Once you make too much noise, they hand you over. The streets are not shocked. For years, people who dealt with him knew his game was crooked. Wicked blogger Ghana has received countless complaints from victims who said Davido G.H. ripped them off in street dealings, refused to pay, and when confronted, threatened to use his money and connections to arrest them instead. Some even claimed he tortured or intimidated them into silence. His own fellow hustlers feared him, and that's why he always moved with heavy security, afraid that someone he ripped off would one day take revenge. But money and power have limits. One anonymous victim told our local correspondent he was ripped off close to $1 million by Davido G.H. Another said he lost $500,000, and these are only the cases we know about. Multiply that by the number of victims too scared to speak publicly, and you begin to see just how big his empire of fraud was. Wicked blogger Ghana has forwarded all evidence we've gathered to our team in New York, and let's not pretend here the FBI is watching. If they're not already on his case, they soon will be, because fraud on this scale always crosses borders. And once the FBI steps in, extradition treaties kick in, and the story changes completely. The Game Boy becomes an international criminal, and Ghana has no choice but to hand him over. It's important to see Davido G.H.'s arrest not just as an isolated case, but as part of a bigger crackdown happening in Ghana. EOCO, led by Raymond Archer, has been under heavy pressure to show results. The current government knows Ghana's reputation is on the line. For too long, when foreigners hear Ghana in the context of online business, they don't think about cocoa, gold, or football. They think scams, romance fraud, and fake investment schemes. This bad branding has stained the entire nation, making it harder for innocent Ghanaians to do legitimate business online. Investors hesitate. Banks blacklist transactions, and ordinary people suffer. That's why the government is aligning itself with the FBI and other international partners, showing that they are willing to crack down on fraud boys to clean Ghana's name. Every arrest like this is not just about one man. It's a signal to the world that Ghana is not sheltering criminals. But let's not sugarcoat it. The crackdown is not always fair or complete. Often, it's the small and medium fish that get sacrificed while the real sharks swim free. Fraud money is not just used to buy cars and jewelry. It's laundered into real estate, flashy businesses, and even politics. Some of the biggest fraud boys are untouchable because they fund political campaigns, buy influence, and protect themselves with powerful connections. That's why Wicked Blogger Ghana will always tell you the truth. Sometimes these high-profile arrests are more about performance than about cleaning the system. They parade the likes of Davido GH as scapegoats to show the international community they are working, but the true kingpins remain behind the curtain. Still, for the streets, the lesson is clear. If you are loud and reckless, you will be the one they use as an example. Davido G.H.'s case is especially interesting because he used the music industry as his cover. He branded himself as a music executive, using artists to launder his image and appear legitimate. He splashed money on promotions, sponsored shows, and tried to buy respect in the entertainment scene. But artists like Yao Hero quickly realized the truth and ran before being dragged down with him. That's the reality of fraud boys who enter the entertainment industry. They do it not to uplift talent, but to create a shield for themselves, a respectable face to hide their scams. And when the shield cracks, everything collapses. Now, the same bloggers and influencers he once paid are silent because nobody wants to tie themselves to a sinking ship. This arrest also highlights how EOCO and the government are shifting tactics. In the past, cases like these could be quietly buried. Pay the right people, silence the media, and life goes on. But things are changing. The international spotlight is too strong. The FBI has its eyes on West Africa, and Ghana is a key focus. They want cooperation, and Ghana can't afford to say no. Already, EOCO has frozen his accounts and properties, a move that shows they are gathering evidence to either prosecute him locally or prepare the grounds for extradition. If the FBI comes knocking with their own evidence of victims abroad, it won't be surprising if Davido G.H. is handed over. And once that happens, the story is no longer about him alone. It becomes about Ghana cleaning its image to avoid sanctions, blacklisting, and economic punishment. Fam, we've seen it all before. Kofi Bode was once a big name, living large, only to fall hard when his fraud dealings caught up with him. Dada Joe Remix thought he was untouchable too, but the system closed in. Pascal Agoni, same story. The pattern never changes. Fraud boys rise fast, flaunt hard, intimidate their peers, and then collapse when the spotlight becomes too bright. Davido G.H. is simply the latest chapter in a book that keeps repeating itself. The difference is, this time, the government is under even more pressure than before. International partnerships are stronger, extradition treaties are in play, and the FBI is actively watching the Ghanaian fraud scene. The chances of him walking away from this clean are very slim. Some may argue that fraud has created wealth for many youths who would otherwise be stuck in poverty. That's true. But what kind of wealth destroys the very country you live in? Fraud money spent recklessly does nothing for the economy. It doesn't create jobs, it doesn't build industries, it doesn't improve lives. It just fuels envy, pressure, and short-lived enjoyment. Imagine if all the millions Davido G.H. flaunted had been invested in businesses, factories, or tech startups. Imagine the jobs that could have been created, the lives improved. Instead, it went into jewelry, cars, rented hype, and bribing bloggers to stay silent. And now, everything is collapsing because none of that fake wealth had a foundation. That's the tragic reality of fraud. It builds castles in the sun, and the tide always comes in. The arrest of Davido G.H. is bigger than just one man's downfall. It's a mirror of Ghana's deeper problem with fraud, our obsession with quick money, and the government's struggle to balance street realities with international pressure. Wicked Blogger Ghana will continue to expose these stories, not because we enjoy seeing people fall, but because the truth must be told. The youth must know that flaunting comes with consequences, that fraud is not a safe hustle, and that the FBI is watching even when you think nobody is. Davido G.H. story is not over yet. EOCO is building its case, accounts are frozen, victims are coming forward, and whispers of FBI involvement are growing louder. If care is not taken, his name will be added to the list of fraud boys who went from kings of the streets to prisoners of the system. The streets should watch closely, because this case is the perfect reminder. The game may look sweet, but the end is always bitter.